Experience life in Bethlehem in the time of Jesus. 24 hours in the city of David. That is what this story is about. Not the mythology, not the stained glass version you have seen your entire life. The real thing. The dust. The noise. The smell of animals and bread and fire and sweat. The sound of children running through narrow stone corridors. The weight of a world on the verge of something it does not yet understand. This is Bethlehem. And for the next 24 hours, you are going to live it. Close your eyes for just a moment. Forget the world you are standing in right now. Forget the screens, the traffic, the notifications, the endless noise of a modern life that never seems to slow down. Now open them again and step back. Step back 2,000 years. Step back to a land where the sky at night was so clear and so full of stars that people named them all, where they tracked their seasons and their prayers by those lights scattered across the darkness above. Step back to a city carved into the Judean hills, a city that smelled of livestock and olive oil and fresh-baked flatbread in the early morning, a city where every stone had a story and every street held generations of memory. Step back to Bethlehem, the city of David. One of the most consequential places in all of human history, and you are going to spend a full day there. Not as a tourist, not as an observer from a distance, but as someone who wakes up inside it, walks its streets, eats its food, breathes its air, and feels the full weight of what it meant to be alive in that time and in that place. The story begins before the sun rises. It is still dark when the city first stirs. In the hills surrounding Bethlehem, shepherds who have been sleeping on the cold ground begin to feel the chill deepen just before dawn, the way it always does in that final hour before light returns. They pull their rough wool cloaks tighter and check their flocks, counting the outlines of sleeping animals by memory more than by sight. These men are not romanticized figures. They are workers. They are calloused-handed, weather-burned, socially marginalized men who do one of the most physically demanding jobs in that world, sleeping outside in all seasons, fighting off predators, walking miles every day across rocky terrain to find enough grazing land to keep their animals alive. In the social order of first-century Judea, shepherds sit near the bottom. They are considered ritually unclean much of the time because of their constant contact with animals. They are not permitted to testify in court. They are seen by the more settled, more religious townspeople as rough men of uncertain character. And yet, the hills around Bethlehem are full of them. Because the land demands it. Because the economy of this region runs on livestock, on wool and milk and meat, and the animals used in the temple sacrifices in Jerusalem, just 6 miles to the north. Without the shepherds, the city does not function. But the city does not exactly celebrate them for it. As the first gray light begins to appear on the eastern horizon, the city itself begins to wake up. Bethlehem in this era is not a large place. It is a market town, a waypoint, a place of agricultural importance in the fertile region known as the Shephelah. Its population in the time of Jesus is perhaps a few thousand people, maybe more during busy seasons, when the Roman census draws travelers from across the region or when religious pilgrims pass through on their way to Jerusalem. The city is built on a ridge, and its streets are not streets in the way you would think of them. They are more like channels. Narrow stone passages barely wide enough for 2 people to pass each other comfortably, winding up and down the hillside in patterns that have nothing to do with modern ideas of urban planning and everything to do with the natural topography of the land and the way generations of families built their homes up against each other over centuries. The buildings are stone, almost universally, because wood is scarce in this part of the world and stone is everywhere. The rooftops are flat, used for sleeping in summer, for drying grain, for storing things, for sitting and watching the world go by in the cool of the evening. The walls are thick to keep the heat out in summer and the cold in during the long Judean winters. Now, the first sounds of the morning begin to fill the air. A woman in one of the upper homes starts grinding grain before full light, the rhythmic scraping sound of stone against stone carrying down through the neighborhood. Grinding grain is women's work in this world, and it is never ending. A family of 5 or 6 people needs several pounds of flour every single day just to make the flatbread that forms the base of every meal. The grinding stones are heavy, and the work takes hours. She starts early so that there will be bread ready before her husband leaves for the fields. From another direction comes the sound of a rooster, then another, then what seems like a dozen of them at once, setting off a chain reaction across the hillside that signals to everyone still sleeping that the day has officially begun. Dogs bark. A baby cries. Somewhere below, in the lower part of the city near the well, a cartwheel creaks as someone begins an early delivery of something. The well is the center of the morning's social world. In a place where there are no pipes, no running water, no infrastructure of the kind that modern people take completely for granted, the well is everything. It is where you go to get the water your family needs to survive that day. And in first-century Bethlehem, going to the well is not a quick errand. The women, and it is almost always women who do this work, carry large ceramic jars on their heads or their shoulders, walk to the well, wait in line if necessary, draw the water, and carry it back. It is heavy, physical labor. A full water jar can weigh 30 or 40 pounds, and it must be done every day, sometimes twice a day. But the well is also, perhaps because of all this shared necessity, one of the most important social spaces in the community. It is where news travels, where relationships are formed and strained and repaired, where a stranger arriving in the city will first be assessed by the women who gather there, and where the mood of the community can be read like a text if you know how to listen. This morning, the mood at the well is cautious. There are Roman soldiers stationed in the area. Not many, not the overwhelming military presence of a major occupation force, but enough to make everyone feel watched. The Romans controlled Judea through a combination of local puppet rulers, tax collectors, and the occasional visible show of force. Herod Antipas rules the region of Galilee, to the north, and the shadow of the broader Herodian dynasty still lies heavy over Bethlehem, which falls under the Roman province of Judea, administered by a Roman prefect. The taxes are crushing. A family that grows grain or tends vines can expect to give up a significant portion of what they produce to the Roman system of taxation before they see a single coin of profit. And on top of the Roman taxes, there are temple taxes, religious dues, and the various other levies that the complex economic and religious system of first-century Judea demands. The average working family in Bethlehem lives close to the edge of what is economically sustainable. Not in desperate starvation, in most cases, but always aware that a bad harvest, a sick animal, an unexpected expense could tip them over into a kind of poverty that would be very difficult to climb out of. The women at the well speak quietly this morning. There is a new group of Roman soldiers camped just outside the eastern gate, they say. Nobody knows exactly why. Somebody's cousin heard that there is some kind of administrative business, a tax assessment or a census update being carried out in the region. Someone else heard that there was trouble up toward Jerusalem, something to do with a preacher or prophet who has been drawing large crowds and making the temple authorities nervous. That kind of trouble always makes the Romans nervous too. And when the Romans are nervous, everyone else is more nervous still. Check right now to see if you are already subscribed to this channel, because if you are not, you are missing stories exactly like this one, told with the depth and the emotion and the detail that make history feel alive again. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you never miss another story like this one. Now the sun is fully up, and Bethlehem is in motion. The market begins to come alive in the lower part of the city, near the main gate. Markets in the ancient world are not the formalized, quiet, transactional spaces of a modern grocery store. They are loud, dense, colorful, overwhelming sensory experiences. Vendors call out to passers-by in voices trained to carry over the noise of the crowd. Animals are being sold and traded in a section just outside the main gate, where the smell is intense and the noise constant. A man with a cart full of olive oil in ceramic amphorae argues with a woman who says the last batch he sold her was watered down. A group of boys sits near a wall selling small clay lamps, simple objects, a saucer-shaped vessel with a pinched spout where the wick goes, but essential in a world where the only artificial light comes from these small flames. A merchant who has traveled from somewhere near the coast has a small selection of dried fish, a luxury here in the inland hills, and he is doing brisk business because fish from the Sea of Galilee has been dried and salted and carried overland to markets throughout Judea. An older man sells herbs and spices from a cloth laid on the ground, cumin and coriander and hyssop and the bitter herbs used in religious observance, and he knows exactly how much of each thing every household in this neighborhood uses and when they will run out because he has been sitting on this same corner for 30 years. The money in use is complicated, because it always is in occupied territories. There are Roman coins which bear the image of the emperor and which present a religious problem for observant Jews because Jewish law forbids graven images. There are regional coins issued by the Herodian rulers, which are designed to sidestep this problem by not bearing human images. And then there is the temple shekel, which is the only currency accepted for the religious taxes and offerings at the temple in Jerusalem, which means that anyone who needs to pay the temple tax has to go through a money changer, an institution that serves a genuine practical function, but that has also become associated in the public mind with exploitation of the poor and the vulnerable. It is a system full of friction and resentment, and it plays out every day in miniature in markets like this one, where a transaction that seems simple on the surface requires navigating multiple layers of economic and religious complexity. A young man named Eli moves through the market with the focused efficiency of someone who has been sent with a list and a limited time to complete it. He is perhaps 19 years old, the eldest son of a carpenter who has a small workshop near the northern part of the city. His father is working today, has been working since before dawn on a commission for a wealthy landowner who needs new door frames for a building he is expanding just outside the city. The work is good, steady income, more than a lot of families in Bethlehem can count on. But Eli knows that his father's hands have been getting stiffer lately, that the arthritis that has been slowly working its way through his joints is making some of the finer work harder to manage. Eli has been learning the trade since he was a small child, the way sons learn their father's trades in this world. Not in school, not from a textbook, but standing next to the man and watching and practicing and being corrected and trying again. He is almost as skilled as his father now. Some of the simpler commissions he handles entirely on his own. But today he is not building anything. Today he is buying olive oil, grain flour, a small amount of dried lentils, some garlic. Basic provisions. He navigates the market with the economy of motion of someone who knows exactly where he is going and exactly what everything costs. He pauses at the olive oil merchant long enough to assess the quality with a practiced eye, lifts the lid of the container, breathes in the smell, watches the way the oil coats the inside of the jar. He has been doing this his whole life. He knows the difference between fresh-pressed first quality and the cheaper stuff that comes from a second pressing and has a slightly more bitter taste. His mother will know the difference too, and she will say nothing if he brings home inferior oil, but he will feel the silence. He stops for a moment near a knot of older men who are deep in conversation near the entrance to what serves as the city's informal gathering place, a large flat area near the gate where community business is conducted, disputes are settled, contracts are witnessed, and the slow ongoing conversation of neighborhood life flows without ceasing. He does not join the conversation, because that would be presumptuous, but he listens as he adjusts the strap on the bag he is carrying. The men are talking about the preacher, the one from Galilee, the one who has been moving through the region for the past year or two, gathering followers, causing disruption, saying things that some people find deeply comforting and that other people find deeply threatening. Some of these men have heard him speak. One of them, a man named Samuel who has a vineyard to the south, says he heard the man speak last autumn near the road to Jerusalem, and that it was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Not like the priests in the synagogue, not like the scribes and Pharisees who lecture and interpret and remind you of every rule you are breaking. Different. He spoke, Samuel says, like a man who actually knew what he was talking about, like a man who had seen something that the rest of them had not yet seen. Another man laughs. He says that kind of talk is what gets people in trouble. He says he has heard a dozen men like this in his lifetime, and they all end the same way. The Romans or the temple authorities or both get nervous, and then it ends very badly, and the people who followed them are left to put their lives back together as best they can. He is not wrong, historically speaking. He is a man shaped by experience and by the reasonable expectation that power protects itself. He is not a villain in this story. He is just a man who has learned how the world works and has decided that the safest thing is to keep your head down and tend your vines. Eli moves on. He has what he needs. He starts back through the narrow streets toward his family's home, the bag heavy on his shoulder, the sounds of the city all around him. Now it is mid-morning, and the city is at full activity. In the synagogue, which is not the grand building that the word might conjure in a modern imagination, but a more modest community space where the Torah scrolls are kept and where the community gathers to read and interpret scripture. A group of older men and some young scholars are engaged in the kind of intense textual debate that is central to Jewish intellectual life in this period. The rabbi is a man of perhaps 55, with a lined face and the slightly distracted air of someone who is always partially living in a conversation that has been going on for centuries. He leads the discussion with a patience that comes from decades of practice, drawing out interpretations, challenging assumptions, holding the space for disagreement while maintaining the essential unity of the community. This is how learning works here. Not lectures, but argument. Not passive reception, but active wrestling with the meaning of texts. The tradition is old. The questions are never fully resolved. The conversation is the point. Outside, in the streets and alleys, the daily texture of life continues to unfold in 1,000 small ways. A group of women sit in a shaded corner working together on a large piece of weaving, their fingers moving with automatic precision while their voices do the real work of connection and community. They are making a heavy wool cloth, the kind used for the outer garments that everyone in this climate needs for winter. The loom they are using is a simple device by modern standards, but the skill required to produce cloth of good quality is considerable, and this group of women collectively holds centuries of knowledge about their craft. They talk while they work, the way people do when their hands are occupied and their mouths are free, and the talk is the full spectrum of human life. A daughter's upcoming marriage, a neighbor's illness, the price of grain and whether the harvest this year will be enough, the Roman soldiers at the eastern gate, the preacher from Galilee, always the preacher from Galilee. His name has been moving through Bethlehem like a thread woven through a piece of cloth. You cannot pull it out without changing the whole fabric. Some people say he is a prophet, in the tradition of Elijah or Isaiah, a man filled with the Spirit of God and called to speak hard truths to a broken world. Some people say he is a teacher of a new kind, one who takes the ancient traditions and shows their living meaning in ways that the formal religious establishment has lost. Some people say more than that. Some people say things in low voices, looking over their shoulders to see who might be listening. The Romans have informants in every community. The temple authorities have their networks of intelligence. Saying the wrong thing in the wrong place can bring consequences that no one in Bethlehem wants to face. A woman named Miriam, who is perhaps 40 years old and who lost her husband 3 years ago to a sudden illness, listens to the conversation about the preacher with a complicated set of feelings that she would not be able to fully articulate even if she tried. She has heard him speak. She made the journey to Jerusalem last year during Passover, along with most of the town, and in the outer courts of the temple, she stood in a crowd and listened to him teach. What she felt then, she has not quite been able to name since. It was not the kind of feeling that the word religious usually evokes for her, which is the feeling of duty, of compliance, of the weight of rules and obligations, and the fear of falling short. It was something more like the feeling of being told for the first time, something you already knew but had never been able to say. It was something like being seen. She does not talk about this often. It is too private, too fragile. But it lives in her. And on mornings like this one, when the city hums around her and the air is warm and the sound of the weaving women fills the alley, she thinks about it and holds it quietly. The midday meal is the most important meal of the day for most families in Bethlehem. The morning work has been heavy, and the afternoon work will continue. But this hour or two at midday is the hinge of the daily rhythm. Families gather. Food is prepared. The flatbread baked in a clay oven or on a flat stone, eaten with olive oil and salt and whatever vegetables are available. Lentils in a broth, garlic, sometimes dried fruit. The diet of an ordinary family in first-century Judea is not elaborate, but it is not inadequate either. It is based on what the land produces, and the land here in the Shephelah is generous to those who know how to work it. The olive groves and the grain fields and the vineyards that surround Bethlehem have fed communities here for thousands of years. Eli sits with his parents and his 2 younger sisters around the low table in the main room of their home. The room is simple: stone walls, an earthen floor covered with woven mats, a clay oven in one corner, a niche in the wall where the family's small collection of household items is arranged with the care that poverty and good housekeeping both demand. The conversation at the table is easy, the comfortable exchange of a family that has spent its life together and knows each other's rhythms. His father talks about the commission, the landowner's specifications, whether the quality of the cedar wood he sourced is going to be sufficient. His mother talks about the well, the news she heard this morning, the Roman soldiers at the eastern gate. His sisters, one of whom is perhaps 13 and the other perhaps 9, argue in low voices about something of their own that is clearly very important to them and entirely opaque to anyone else. Eli eats and listens and offers a word here and there. This is his world. This is the center of it, right here. This table, these people, this food, this light coming in through the small window and painting a square on the floor. After the meal, his father rests for a short while, the way he always does now, the way men who have been working with their hands since the age of 7 need to rest in the middle of the day. Eli goes back out into the streets. He has his own business to attend to this afternoon. He is meeting with a man named Joseph who lives on the other side of the city. A man who has been asking around about someone who could help him with a simple but precise piece of carpentry work. A new door for a storage room. Eli can do this easily. But the meeting is also about something else, because Joseph is a relative, distantly, the way everyone in a town this size is related to everyone else in some way. And Joseph has a son, or a foster son, or something that the neighborhood speaks about in deliberately vague terms, who has recently returned to the area after a period of absence. And there are stories about this young man, this son of Joseph, that Eli has been hearing his whole life, and that he has never quite been able to sort out in his own mind. The meeting takes place in Joseph's workshop, which smells of fresh wood shavings and olive oil used to treat the finished pieces. Joseph is an older man now, his hair fully gray, his face deeply lined, but his eyes are still quick, and his hands, though marked by decades of hard use, still move with precision over the surface of a piece of cedar he is sanding smooth. He greets Eli with warmth, the warmth of a man who remembers when Eli was a child and who has watched him grow into someone capable and serious. They talk about the door, the measurements, the type of wood, the hardware that will be needed. It is a professional conversation. But then, inevitably, it becomes something else. Joseph sets down his sandpaper and looks out through the open door of his workshop at the street outside, at the flow of people going about their afternoon. He says, almost as if he is talking to himself, that he has been thinking a lot lately about what it all means. About whether the life he has built here, the workshop, the family, the daily rhythms of this city, is the thing that was meant for him, or just the scaffolding around the thing that was meant for him. Eli is not sure how to respond to this, because it is not the kind of thing men typically say to each other in the middle of a business meeting. But he is young enough to still be fully open to the unexpected, so he listens. Joseph talks about his son. The stories are true, he says, or they are as true as he knows how to make them. Something happened years ago that he has never been able to fully explain to himself or to anyone else. His wife Mary, who is now long gone to the place all of them are eventually going, never stopped knowing what she knew. She held it with a certainty that he never fully shared, because he is a practical man, a carpenter, a man who works with solid and measurable things. But he never stopped believing her. He never stopped watching what he thought he was watching. And now, hearing the stories coming back from Galilee, from Jerusalem, from all along the roads of Judea, he feels something that he does not have a word for. Pride, maybe, and fear, and a grief that has no clean object, because the thing he is afraid of losing has not yet been lost. He is a father. It is that simple and that bottomless. Tell me in the comments right now what you think it must have felt like to be the parent of someone the entire world was watching. Leave your answer below because this conversation is too important to stay one-sided. Eli walks home in the late afternoon with more inside him than he had when he left. The sun is beginning its descent over the western horizon, and it turns the stone of Bethlehem into something close to gold. The shadows in the narrow streets grow long and dramatic, and the temperature, which has been pleasantly warm through the day, begins to drop with the speed that only a clear sky can produce in the Judean hills, where the heat that the stone absorbs during the day radiates out fast once the sun goes low. People are moving with slightly more urgency now, the way the body naturally responds to the changing light and temperature, finishing up the last of the afternoon's work, heading toward home and fire and the evening meal. In the lower part of the city, near the gate where the market was this morning, a group of men are gathered in a more tense configuration than the easy morning conversations. There is a dispute. A man who farms a piece of land on the southern edge of the city's territory is claiming that his neighbor has moved the boundary stones that mark the edge of his property. The neighbor denies this. Both of them are speaking at once, and their voices are raised, and the half-dozen men who have gathered around them are listening with the focused attention of people who understand that this kind of dispute, if it goes wrong, can divide families and friendships in ways that last for generations. The oldest man in the group, a figure of respected authority in the neighborhood, holds up his hand for quiet. He will speak, and they will listen. This is the mechanism of local justice in a world without courts that are easily accessible or trusted. The community resolves its own disputes through the authority of its most respected elders, and the resolution has moral force because everyone present witnesses it and is expected to honor it. It works, not perfectly, not always, but more often than might be expected, because in a community this small, no one can afford the long-term damage that comes from being known as someone who refuses to honor a community judgment. The children of Bethlehem are everywhere in the late afternoon, in the way that children in every era exploit the transitional time between the structured activities of the day and the enforced quiet of the evening. Boys chase each other through the narrow streets with the pure physicality of bodies that have not yet learned to ration their energy. Girls play games that have been passed down through generations so long that no one remembers who invented them. Games with pebbles and chalk marks on stone floors. Games that involve elaborate rules and fierce competitive investment. A small group of mixed-age children has gathered near the well, not to draw water but because the flat paving stones around it make a good surface for their purposes, and they are deep in some kind of collaborative game that seems to involve a lot of negotiation and a lot of breaking and re-establishing of the rules of the negotiation. This is childhood as it has always been. Unmediated, physical, social, loud, completely absorbed in itself. A particular child catches the eye. She is perhaps 6 years old, with dark eyes and an expression of total seriousness, and she is sitting slightly apart from the main group, watching the game with the air of someone who is working something out. Her name is Ruth, and she is the granddaughter of the woman Miriam who sat with the weaving women this morning. She comes here with her grandmother sometimes in the mornings, and she has developed the habit of claiming this same corner as her thinking spot. She is not unhappy. She is just being herself, which at age 6 means that she has not yet been fully taught to mask the life of her own mind behind the performance of sociability. She watches the older children play, and what she is working out, if you could see inside her head, is the question of fairness, why the bigger children always get to make the rules, whether that is right and if it is not right, what the word for that wrongness is. She does not have the word yet. She will spend the rest of her life working toward it. Her grandmother calls her from the doorway of a house down the alley, and she gets up without protest and walks toward the sound of her name. The evening is coming. The fire is being lit. The day is folding itself toward its end. Nightfall in Bethlehem is not the gradual dimming of a city with electric infrastructure. It is real darkness, coming fast and complete. The stars appear in their thousands, the Milky Way a visible river of light across a sky that has never been touched by artificial light from below. And the effect is, by the report of anyone who has experienced truly dark skies after a lifetime of light pollution, staggering. The city pulls inward, into its homes and fires and the small circles of warm light cast by the clay lamps that sit in niches in the walls. Families eat their evening meal. Neighbors visit for a short time. The conversation turns slower, quieter, the way conversation does by firelight. Children fall asleep quickly, worn out by the physical demands of a life lived entirely in the physical world. The evening prayers are said in homes and in the synagogue, the ancient words that have been said by people in this land for centuries, words that hold inside them the full weight of a people's history and hope and grief and faithfulness. The prayers are not quiet exactly, but they are interior in a way that the day's work is not. They are the moment when the community turns, individually and together, towards something larger than itself, and tries to remember that the work and the disputes and the market and the tax collectors and the Roman soldiers at the eastern gate are not the whole of the story. That there is more. that there has always been more. The shepherds are still out in the hills. They have been out there all day, as they are every day, watching the flocks graze across the rocky hillside, moving them from one patch of grass to another, keeping them together, watching for the signs of trouble that a shepherd learns to read in the behavior of the animals, the way a suddenly alert posture in several animals at once might mean a predator is nearby, the way a restless circling in the flock can mean illness is moving through it. It is not a boring life, though it might look that way from outside. It requires constant attention, physical endurance, and a specific kind of knowledge that takes years to develop. The men who do it have a relationship with the land and the animals and the sky that most of the townspeople have lost, the intimate, continuous attention that comes from being exposed to the natural world without protection or distraction. As night deepens, they make their fire and sit around it, eating whatever they have brought from the city, bread and olives and maybe some dried fruit. They talk in the way men talk when there is nothing pressing to do, easy and unhurried, jumping from subject to subject, following associations rather than agendas. One of them has a younger brother who is thinking about joining one of the groups that follow the Galilean preacher. This is a subject of some amusement among the older men, not unkind, but the amusement of people who have seen the world long enough to be skeptical of the next thing that is going to change everything. And yet one of them, the oldest, says nothing. He sits with his back against a rock and looks up at the stars, and there is something in his face that is harder to read than amusement or skepticism. He was there years ago in these same hills, on a night he has told no one about, because he could never find words that would not make him sound either foolish or dangerous. He saw something. He felt something. And then he went and saw a child in a stable, and he came back out into these same hills, and he has been here ever since. An old man now, with the kind of silence in him that some experiences produce, experiences that are too large for the containers that ordinary language provides. He looks at the stars for a long time. Then he adds another piece of wood to the fire. Inside the city, Eli is lying awake in the dark, listening to the sound of his father breathing in the next room. The breathing is steady, but there is something in it, a slight unevenness that Eli has begun to notice in recent months. His father is aging. The work that has been the center of his life is becoming harder. Eli knows, without having spoken about it directly with anyone, that the shape of his family's life is going to change, that the weight that has rested on his father is going to shift onto him, and that he needs to be ready for that. He is not afraid of the work. He was built for the work. But he feels lying there in the dark, listening to his father breathe, the full weight of love and responsibility together. The way they are not separate things but one thing. The one thing that is the hardest and most central thing in a human life. He thinks about what Joseph said this afternoon, about what it means to watch someone you love become more than you ever imagined. He thinks about the preacher from Galilee. He thinks about the things Samuel said at the gate this morning. He thinks about Miriam and whatever it was he saw in her face when someone mentioned the name. He thinks about the old shepherd he has seen sometimes on the hills to the south, sitting alone, looking at something no one else seems to be able to see. He thinks about all of this without reaching a conclusion, because that is what honest thinking usually produces, not conclusions, but a deeper sense of the complexity of things, and a patience, if you are lucky, to stay inside the questions without demanding that they resolve. Sleep comes eventually, the way it always does, and Bethlehem sleeps. The city is quiet now, the stone of its walls still holding some of the warmth of the day, the stars overhead in their ancient patterns, the fires banked to embers in 1,000 homes, the animals in their pens and on their hillsides, the children in their deepest sleep, the old people lying somewhere between wakefulness and rest, holding as old people do the accumulated texture of a lifetime, all the days that led to this day, all the mornings and markets and meals and disputes and prayers. The city breathes. It is so small. It is so old. It has been here since before memory. This ridge of stone above the Judean hills, and it will be here long after every person currently sleeping in its houses is dust. But right now, tonight, it is full of the irreducible fact of human life, the stubborn, ordinary, extraordinary fact of people who wake up every day and go to the well and grind the grain and do the work and argue and love and pray and sleep and wake up and do it all again, in the presence of a sky full of stars and a history full of meaning and a present moment that is, always, the only moment there is. This is Bethlehem. This is 24 hours in the city of David, not a monument, not a symbol, a place where people lived, where they really, truly lived, and where something happened, or began to happen, that the world is still thinking about 2,000 years later. If you have felt, watching this story, something like what the people in it felt, something like the weight of ordinary days and extraordinary context pressing against each other, then you already understand more about this place and this time than any textbook can teach you. History is not made of facts. It is made of people. People like these. People like you. Give this story a like right now if it made Bethlehem feel real to you for the first time. And share it with someone who has always wanted to understand what it was actually like to live in that world, in that time, in that city carved into the Judean hills where the stars were so close, you felt like you could reach up and rearrange them with your hand. Share it because stories like this one are worth keeping alive. Share it because the people who lived them deserve to be remembered as fully human and not just as background characters in someone else's narrative. If you watched until here it is because you loved this story, leave a comment saying, "I watched until the end," so that I can get to know you and know who really enjoys the stories on this channel. And check right now if you are already subscribed to this channel, because there are more stories like this one waiting for you. Stories that take you inside the worlds of history and show you what it actually felt like to be alive in the moments that changed everything. Subscribe now, turn on the notifications, and make sure the next story finds you. Bethlehem, the city of David. 24 hours that, 2,000 years later, still echo across time. But the story of Bethlehem's 24 hours is not finished simply because the city sleeps. Because even in sleep, the city continues. Because even in the hours between midnight and the return of the dawn, things are happening that matter. The night watch continues its rounds through the empty streets, the slow footsteps of a man whose job it is to be awake when everyone else is not, to notice what is out of place, to call out if something requires attention. He is a man of middle age who took this job because it fit his nature. He has always been someone who operates better in the quiet hours when the social demands of the day are lifted and the world is reduced to its essential shapes, the street and the wall and the sky and his own footsteps and his own thoughts. He knows every inch of this city in the dark. He knows which doorway belongs to which family, which corner the cats gather at, which roof has a loose stone that makes a particular sound when the wind hits it. He knows this place the way only someone who has been a night watchman in it for 15 years can know it, intimately, physically, without the mediation of the daily social performance that the daylight hours require. He is thinking tonight, as he walks, about the future, not the abstract future, not history and prophecy and the broad sweep of whatever is unfolding in the wider world, but his own specific and personal future. His daughter is to be married in the spring. He has been saving for years toward the bride price, the formal gift that a groom's family makes to a bride's family, and he is almost there, almost to the amount that he and the groom's father agreed upon at the beginning of the negotiation. Almost, but not quite. There is a shortfall that he has been turning over in his mind like a stone in a river, looking for any edge of the problem that he has not yet considered. He does not feel desperate about it. He feels the pressure, but he has been a practical man his whole life, and practical men do not despair. They keep turning the stone. Eventually, they find the edge they were looking for. He stops at the corner near the eastern gate and looks out into the darkness beyond the wall. The Roman soldiers have their own fire burning, a good distance away, and in the night it is just a point of orange light against the black of the hills. He watches it for a moment. He does not hate the Romans. He does not love them either. They are a fact, the way a drought is a fact or a difficult neighbor is a fact. You work around facts. You build your life in the spaces that the facts leave open to you. He turns and continues his round. In the home of Miriam, the widow, the night is not entirely peaceful. She wakes in the deep middle of it, the way she often does since her husband died, not from a bad dream, but from the simple fact of the empty space beside her where another person used to be. The absence has a physical quality to it, a specific temperature and texture that she notices every time she wakes in the night. She has been told by well-meaning people that this will fade. She believes them, mostly. But tonight it is present, and she lies there for a while in the darkness and lets it be present without trying to push it away. There is a kind of practice in this that she has developed over 3 years, the practice of not fighting what is true, of letting the grief be grief and the loneliness be loneliness without dressing them up as something more or less than they are. It does not make the feelings go away, but it makes them bearable in a way that fighting them never did. After a while, she gets up and sits by the window that looks out over the lower part of the city toward the hills. The stars are extraordinary. She has always loved the stars, has always felt, looking at them, a sense of proportion, a reminder that the life she is living is taking place inside something enormous, something ancient, something that was here long before her and will be here long after. She does not find this thought depressing. She finds it oddly comforting. The smallness of her grief next to the size of the sky does not diminish the grief. It just puts it in a frame where it can be held without becoming the whole of everything. She thinks about the preacher from Galilee again. She thinks about what he said in the outer courts of the temple, the way his voice carried without apparent effort over the crowd, the way he spoke about the poor and the lost and the forgotten as if they were not unfortunate circumstances to be pitied from a safe distance, but the actual center of the thing, the actual point, the actual people around whom the whole of the moral universe was organized. She had never heard anyone say this before. She had heard people say things that sounded like it, the formal language of religious compassion, but not like this. This was different. This was like someone describing the world as it actually was, rather than as the official version of it said it should be. She sat in that crowd and she felt something shift in her, something that had been weight becoming something that was not weight, and she had not been entirely sure ever since whether that shift was real or whether it was the emotional suggestibility of a grieving woman in a crowd. She tests it sometimes, in the quiet of nights like this one, looking at the stars. And it still feels real. It still feels like something that happened to her, rather than something she made up. She does not know what to do with that, but she holds it, the way you hold something valuable that you do not yet know the proper place for. The roosters begin again before she has gone back to sleep, and she watches the sky lighten in the east from her window, and then she gets up to start the day. There is grain to grind, there is water to fetch, there is a granddaughter who will wake soon wanting food and the sound of a familiar voice. There is a day to live. The day that comes after the 24 hours we have been tracking, which will be much like the 24 hours we have been tracking, and the one before it, and the one before that, the vast majority of human life being composed of this repetitive, textured, meaningful ordinariness, rather than of the dramatic moments that make it into the formal record. This is what history does not usually tell you. It tells you the dramatic moments, the births and the deaths and the battles and the proclamations. It does not usually tell you about the night watchman thinking about his daughter's wedding, or the widow looking at the stars, or the boy carpenter lying awake listening to his father breathe, or the old shepherd with the silence in him that no words are big enough to fill. But these people were here. They lived these lives. They felt these things. And the world they lived in, the world of Bethlehem 2,000 years ago, was not a backdrop or a stage set. It was the full, complicated, sensory, emotionally dense reality of human life, as real as the world you are living in right now, as full of small joys and quiet griefs and persistent hopes and the daily work of keeping yourself and the people you love alive and together. Experience life in Bethlehem in the time of Jesus. That is what this story has tried to give you. Not a sermon, not a tourist's itinerary, not a simplified picture book version of a complex historical reality, but the texture of it, the smell, and the sound, and the weight of it. The people who walked those streets and drew water from that well and ground their grain in the pre-dawn dark and argued about boundary stones and told stories about a preacher from Galilee in low voices, looking over their shoulders. The people who loved their children and mourned their dead and watched the stars from windows in the middle of sleepless nights and asked the same questions that human beings have always asked about what it all means and what is expected of them and whether the story they are living in is going somewhere worth going. Because these questions are not historical. They are not safely contained in the past. They are the questions you are carrying around with you right now. In your own version of a daily life full of work and relationship and uncertainty and small moments of grace, and the occasional large moment that shifts something in you, and leaves you trying to figure out what you are holding and where it belongs. The city of David, Bethlehem, a ridge of stone in the Judean hills. 2,000 years ago, and, in the ways that matter most, not that far away at all. Now the sun has fully risen over the eastern hills, and a new 24 hours has begun, a new set of people going to the well and the market and the workshop and the fields, a new set of conversations about taxes and harvests and the preacher from Galilee and what it all means. And somewhere on the road coming into the city from the south, a figure walking. A young man, maybe, who has been out in the wider world and is coming home for a visit. Or a traveler, a pilgrim, someone making their way toward Jerusalem and stopping here for the night. Or just someone who lives here and is coming back from an errand in the next village over, walking the road they have walked 100 times, seeing the roofline of the city ahead of them against the morning sky, feeling the small, complicated warmth of return that everyone feels when they are almost home. Whoever they are, they walk into the city through the gate, and the guard nods at them, and the sounds of the market beginning to stir come up to meet them, and the smell of bread baking somewhere nearby, and the voices of children, and the creak of a cart, and the morning conversations at the well. They are in Bethlehem. They are in the city of David. They are inside the 24 hours. They are alive in the full and irreducible meaning of that word on a morning in Judea 2,000 years ago, and the sky above them is the same sky that is above you now, and the questions they are carrying are not so very different from yours, and the story is still going. Give this video a like right now, and share it with someone who needs to feel history this way, not as a distant thing, but as a living, breathing human reality that connects across time to exactly where they are standing right now. Share it, because stories like this one are the ones that stay with you. Share it because Bethlehem deserves to be known as more than a name in a song. Share it because the people who lived here deserve to be remembered as fully, completely, magnificently human. If you watched all the way to here, then you already know what this channel is about and you already know why it matters. Leave a comment right now saying, "I watched until the end, so that I can know you are here, so that I can know who the people are who sit with these stories all the way through, the people who want not just information but actual connection to the past and to the human beings who made it." Your comment matters. It tells me you are here. And knowing you are here makes these stories worth telling. Subscribe to this channel right now if you have not yet done it, because there are stories waiting for you here that will take you into ancient Rome, into medieval Japan, into the markets of the Silk Road, into the courts of African kingdoms that the history books in most schools still refuse to teach, into the living rooms and workshops and fields of people who lived through moments that changed everything and who experienced those moments from the inside, the way you have just experienced. Bethlehem from the inside today. Subscribe and turn on the notifications so that every new story reaches you directly, because these are the kinds of stories that deserve to be found rather than missed. Bethlehem, the city of David, 24 hours, a real place, real people, a real world that was the whole world to the people living inside it, the way your world is the whole world to you. May you carry something of it with you, some small piece of that stone-walled, star-canopied, bread-scented, deeply human city into whatever comes next in your own 24 hours. The afternoon light in Bethlehem has a particular quality that painters have tried to capture for centuries and that photographs can only approximate. It is the light of a high desert elevation filtered through air that carries just enough dust to soften it, that turns everything it touches to the color of warm honey, that makes the limestone walls of the buildings glow from within as if they have been storing the sun's warmth all day and are now returning it to the world in a gentler form. The children playing in the streets move through this light like creatures who were made for exactly this environment, which of course they were. Born here, growing up here, their bodies calibrated to this altitude and this climate and this particular quality of afternoon that pours down through the narrow passages between houses and makes even the most ordinary corner look like something worth remembering. An old man sits in this light outside his doorway, doing what old men in every culture and era do when the afternoon affords them rest. He is watching. He is doing it with the unhurried, comprehensive attention of someone who has been watching this particular stretch of street for so long that he no longer needs to actively look to see everything. He knows when a child is moving too fast toward the corner, where the well's wet stones make the ground slippery. He knows when a stranger has entered the neighborhood because the way the other people on the street shift slightly tells him. He knows the sound of every cartwheel and the gait of every regular passerby. He is the memory of this street, the living record of everything that has happened here in the past 60 years. And though no one has officially appointed him to this role, everyone on the street understands it, and the children in particular treat him with a respectful wariness, as if being seen by him is slightly different from being seen by anyone else. His name is Joachim, and he has lived in this house his entire life. His parents lived here before him. His grandparents lived here before them. The house has been added to and repaired and expanded over generations until it has the organic, unplanned quality of something that grew rather than was built. He was born in the back room, and he expects to die somewhere in these walls as well, and he does not find anything sad about this. The world is large, and some people are called to move through it, and that is its own kind of life. But being rooted, being the kind of person who knows the texture of one place completely and whose identity is woven into that place, is also its own kind of life, and not a lesser one. He has outlived his wife. He has watched his children grow and leave and come back and leave again. He has watched the Roman occupation begin and deepen and become simply the weather of the political world, something you live under rather than something you fight. He has watched the city change in small ways and remain the same in the ways that matter. He is thinking, as he often does in these afternoon hours, about time. Not in a philosophical sense, but in a personal one. He is old enough now that the past is more populated than the future, and he finds himself living increasingly inside the memories of the people and the moments that made him what he is. His wife's face, the particular laugh of a friend who died 20 years ago, the smell of his mother's bread, the sound of his father's hammer from the workshop that used to be at the back of the house before his son converted it to a storage room. These memories do not feel like the past. They feel like the permanent furniture of his interior life, more stable in some ways than the present, which keeps shifting and surprising him with its changes. He sits in the afternoon light and lets them move through him and is grateful for them, the way you are grateful for something you almost lost and then did not lose after all. Experience life in Bethlehem in the time of Jesus. 24 hours in the city of David. This is not a distant world. This is the human world. The same one you inhabit, in a different arrangement, with different tools and different languages and different fears, but with the same fundamental architecture of love and loss and work and hope, and the daily project of making meaning inside a life that is always both more and less than you expected it to be. If you have stayed with this story, you are the kind of person this channel was made for. Stay, and welcome home to the city of David.
These are the stories that remind us who we have always been and who we still are underneath all the noise of the modern world. Thank you for being here. Now go live your own 24 hours with everything this city gave you. The dust of Bethlehem settles, the stars return, and somewhere on the hillside, the shepherds keep their watch, as they always have, as they always will, in this city that time cannot fully claim and the world cannot fully forget.